There's a culture of corruption. Former USAID director spills agency's abuse and waste that he says runs deep. Wow. So we have a former director um, basically admitting something that we've learned about USAID, about the fraud and the waste and the abuse. He finally got someone that worked there that's going to tell us about it. So we're going to play the clip. This happened on Jesse Waters. We're going to talk about it. But before we get started, go ahead and hit that like button. Share this out so we can get this information out there. Subscribe if you're not already a subscriber. And hit that alarm bell so you know when I'm putting out new stuff. Also, check out my link tree in the description. It has a link to my Patreon. That's where I talk about things that I can't talk about here. There's also a link to my Instagram and my X account, so follow me there as well. All right, so let's get into this news. Now, this comes from the Daily Caller, and they report a former U.S. Agency for International Development, or USAID director, appeared Wednesday on Fox News to reveal details on what he said were the agency's misused resources and deeply rooted corruption. Dating back to the early days of the Trump administration, former director Mark Moyer, who took office in February 2018, recounted on Jesse Waters' Primetime what he said was an agency culture steeped in inefficiency and malpractice, starting with an unconventional orientation exercise that labeled him as a Scandinavian woman in a privilege walk. What the heck is that? This exercise, meant to highlight systematic privileges and disadvantages, instead served as a prelude to the deeper issues plaguing USAID. What the world? So let's just get to the clip here. Here we go.
Yes, and great to be with you, Jesse. So I didn't get into the agency till February 2018, and this is one of the big differences that we're already seeing. That in 2017, Trump administration was very slow to get into the agency. So I get there in February, and we have what's called a privilege walk as part of the orientation, where you are given an identity. Now, I was a Scandinavian woman, and so when they read lines like, I get discriminated against because of government services, or people don't look how I look. So you took a step forward if it applied, and if it didn't. And so I ended up near the front, and the indigenous woman with unwanted pregnancy and the male prostitute were at the other end, and then we talked about our privileges.
All right.
Wow.
So you were trained to be a Scandinavian woman in a privilege walk, not root out corruption. What kind of disguises do they use to fund these projects? I mean, do they just change the names of these things? Is there really some other reason we're doing this?
Yeah, they're very effective at rebranding things. So in the first Trump administration, the priorities were support national interests, as they are now. Another thing was countering terrorism and promoting self-reliance. So I went to a country, just to give one example, they had a feminist women's book club that had been started under the Obama administration, and then they now said this is a counter-terror program because feminist women are key fighters in the battle against terrorism.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Wow.
What happened when you...
What happens is they give them these names like the feminist and they go in and they intentionally create these terrorist groups. That's what's happening with USAID. And this is what I've been saying for the last couple of days, that's what's happening. They're funding these terrorist groups. Just let me rewind it again so you can listen to it, listen to how what he says about it again. Listen to it. Tell me, is this not what they're doing intentionally? They calling them these names. Oh, we want to help, give money to feminism in Arab countries or whatever, but they're actually creating terrorist groups with this money. Listen to this again. Let me rewind it. Here we go.
That had been started under the Obama administration, and then they now said this is a counter-terror program because
here we go.
promoting self-reliance. So I went to a country, just to give one example, they had a feminist women's book club that had been started under the Obama administration. And then they now said this is a counter-terror program because women, feminist women, are key fighters in the battle against terrorism.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Wow.
What happened when you raised concerns that this thing was just a big corrupt money pit?
Yeah, so I reported one of my subordinates for criminal conflict of interest. And then the first discouraging sign was I was told, well, you know, that's nice you want to do that. Most people here don't want to report corruption. Now, they didn't tell me why. I later figured out it's because you get in a lot of trouble. So I was accused of publishing.
Hold on. You can't report corruption? They want to allow this corruption to happen, our government? What do you mean? They're allowing this to happen? That's what you're saying?
And classified information and something I'd written 2 years earlier, which had never been subjected to any prior question. And so they ultimately used that to fire me. Now, the people who were engaged in the corruption managed to hold on to their jobs. And so there's a culture of corruption that says if you are going to criticize anything corrupt, we're going to come after you. And we're going to use the tools that are supposed to be used to go after criminals to come after you. So they ended up firing me based on this bogus accusation. And I've been in court for the last 3 years trying to get them to turn over the facts. And this is, of course, what we've seen with a lot of cases with Senator Ernst, for example. They refuse to turn over information to the courts or to members of Congress. And so this is why.
How can they get away with refusing to turn over information like that to the courts and to people that's supposed to be holding them accountable? They're not handing over this information. How can they get away with that?
People are fed up.
So they stonewall and then they weaponize classified information to take you down. That sounds quite familiar. How do you think DOJ is doing so far uncovering this fraud inside USAID?
Well, from what I've seen so far, they seem to be doing a good job. You know, I do think you're going to need forensic accountants to go in there. It's probably going to take a long time because these bureaucrats have devised very crafty ways to hide money. So I was there in 2019, more than 2 years after the Trump administration came in the first time. We were still finding programs that the political appointees didn't know about. Now, you'd think you'd go in and say, okay, guys, tell us where the money is. But somehow, you know, that they will come up with some excuse why they didn't give it to you. And that's partly why I think you're seeing this more heavy-handed approach, because the people there were so good the first Trump term at hiding things from us and mislabeling them and slow rolling them. And, you know, you also, I think the first term, some of the Trump appointees were frankly not.
They do this because a lot of it is funding. Like I said, a lot of it is funding like terrorism and things like that. And so they don't want this information out there. Of course, they're not going to release this information.
Not as vigilant as they should have been. It seems like now there's a much stronger effort and a more concerted effort to go in and get all of the information.
Wow. Crazy stuff. So, so what he was saying was, I kind of misinterpreted it a little bit, but what he was saying was, they would change the name of like the feminist thing to like a counter-terrorist group, so they wouldn't know that it has anything to do with feminism, to hide it from like the Trump administration, the first term and stuff like that. So that's how they get away with funding these programs and stuff, just by changing the names. So even though they be pushing agendas like the LGBTQ and all the DEI stuff that they be pushing with USAID, all they would do is just change the naming of these things so they try to hide the true intentions of these programs, is what he was saying. I kind of misconstrued it a little bit. But the director's tenure at USAID was marked by his attempts to combat these problems. He said that he reported a subordinate for a criminal conflict of interest. The response, however, was discouraging. They ended up firing him for it. It's just crazy. And President Donald Trump and Elon Musk disrupted USAID on Monday by closing its office and declared the agency's impending shutdown. After Musk announced on an X Spaces chat that he and Trump had decided to close USAID, the administration instructed employees from the agency's Ronald Reagan building to telework. By Monday afternoon, Secretary of State Marco Rubio stepped in as acting director. Republican Iowa Senator Joni Ernst also said that members of USAID had hindered and even threatened her attempts to supervise how the agency distributes its money. How can an agency get away with that? That's just crazy. This is why Trump is going in with the hammer, Trump and Musk, and busting things up, because you got to remember, he tried to do some of these things during his first administration. He tried to drain the swamp during his first administration, and he wasn't able to do it. That's why he going in heavy-handed now. But y'all let me know what y'all think about this. Leave your comments down below. Like, share, and subscribe, and check out jjthepsychotherapist.com for the latest in news. Until next time, peace.